Hackers, welcome to the show. I'm C.S. Joseph. This is Cutting Edge Podcast, March 2024. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing the negligent function, also known as what we've colloquially called the poop function, basically. But this is going to be the poop function part 2, because we introduced it in a previous Cutting Edge episode. So it's basically part 2. We're going to be going a little bit deeper in order to increase our understanding of specifically what exactly this function actually does. And I'm going to be utilizing several anecdotes from people in my life to actually be able to demonstrate what it is. The first thing you got to remember, there are a couple of inputs that you need to have in order to be able to process this information to get a desired output, so you actually understand what the hell it is you're doing. So first thing first, you need to understand optimism versus pessimism of cognitive functions, right? So just a little review here. Hero function, child function, nemesis function, right? Trickster function, these are the optimistic functions, right? What's going on, Samwise? My brother in arms. So pessimistic functions, parent function, inferior function, then we have the critic and the demon, right? You got to know optimistic functions and pessimistic functions according to cognitive attitude. It's very important. Cognitive attitude is ultimately the driver of what we're calling the negligent function, and then obviously, these pseudo sub-attitudes, basically. I don't even know what we're going to call them. We need to upgrade our nomenclature for these. But I mean, hey, it's the Cutting Edge Podcast. We can do whatever we want because it's. Good on you, Samwise. Good on you. But I probably still need to talk to Fib or the team and figure out exactly what we're going to be naming these different functions, because there's a lot more to explore here than just what we're calling the negligent function, aka the poop function, as we've called it. So it's one of the two, right? Just one of the two. So, but there's many. There's many. But so the next input they need to realize is your universal compatibility theory. In order to actually know that, you need to know a person's octagram, essentially. So goes in order here. Obviously, you have to psychoanalyze somebody accurately within the personality type. That's the first step. Naturally, then you have to psychoanalyze their octagram accurately. That's the second step. Then you need to identify pessimistic versus optimistic functions in their cognitive function stack. That's step 3. And then step 4 is identify what their UCT actually is. Now, this is talked about a lot in, what do we call it? The Ego Hacking Your Fear Masterclass, where we are identifying different octagrams have a particular preference based on feminine primary or masculine primary functions. And that is essentially what UCT is. You have to know UCT in order to get to the next step. So step 4 is identify a person's UCT. If they are a woman, then it's one of the 4 extroverted functions. If they are a man, you have to identify one of the introverted functions, because introverted functions are masculine and extroverted functions are feminine, basically. So, be that as it may, you got UCT, figured it out. Then after that, the next thing you need to understand is cognitive axis. And you have to look at the cognitive axis of the UCT function, or whatever feminine primary function or masculine primary function a person has, right? And whatever cognitive function happens to be in direct axis, okay, direct axis to whatever UCT function is, feminine primary, masculine primary function, you have just then, at that point, identified the negligent function, aka the poop function, as we decided to call it randomly because, lulz. So based on that, then you've identified it. It's that simple. So what would be mine? Okay, so I'm a UDSF ENTP. Because I'm UDSF, all UDSF types favor either the hero or parent function. And if it's a man, whatever hero or parent happens to be introverted, that is their masculine primary function. So in my case, the introverted function that's in my top 2 functions as UDSF just happens to be my parent function. That's TI parent. So TI parent is my masculine primary function. That's why I'm all about telling the facts, telling the truth. You know what I'm saying? That's what I do. So with that in mind, the function that is in direct access with TI parent masculine primary is extroverted feeling child. Throughout my life, I have been particularly down on my extroverted feeling child on a regular basis? It's because it's overblown. It's overdone. I give way too much balloons and candy, basically, with my extroverted feeling child, like on a regular basis. Oftentimes, people in my inner circle tell me that I give people too much. Little do people know that probably about 60% of my work I often do, it's basically pro bono. I'm just out there helping people on a regular basis. In terms of like the amount of time that I actually spend, delivering content and making money off of it, I'd say about 60% of the effort that I put into this line of work is actually done pro bono. It's actually given out for free, much to the dismay of my team. And and it's because my extroverted feeling child is my negligent function. It's the negligent function. The reason for this is because, from an optimistic perspective or a pessimistic perspective, you have to kind of be aware of where there's like this hyper investment or hyper under investment when it comes to the negligent function. And these investments like hella matter. So for example, because my negligent function is in cognitive axis with my masculine primary function of TI parent, right? So that makes it my FE child is my negligent function. Its negligence is expressed in a certain way because it is an optimistic function, okay? Because it's optimistic. So what happens is it causes FE child to become overly optimistic, hyper optimistic, basically. Hyper optimistic. Or in this case, hyper childish, okay? Hyper optimistic child, okay? So it's extra child. It's extra childish. It's extra immature, right? But at the same time, it's an optimistic child, right? Because child function is optimistic. So it's extra optimistic, it's extra childish. So what ends up happening is that I end up giving more. It kind of comes off like Chase is just, Mr. People Pleaser. Let's be honest, right? So I end up giving too much. And then because I end up giving too much, I'm actually at risk of actually causing myself to become unconscious focused over time because I end up giving too much with my extroverted feeling child without receiving very much in return. And I'm putting in so much effort, in my extroverted feeling child towards other people, but I don't often get that back in return, right? So I end up feeling entirely drained. I end up taking on too many obligations. This actually is a pathway or a pathology, basically, for someone who is UDSF to become UDUF, essentially. Because I remember, I used to make statements like, I'm this king, the king of the ego hacker community, right? And I have this table, and the ego hackers, they eat from this table, but I oftentimes, as the king, don't even eat from my own table, right? That's basically a UDUF perspective, to have that an ENTP would have in that particular moment, right? It's a UDUF perspective. It's a pull, it's a draw to UDUF but in part, it's my fault. It's actually in that context, it's actually my fault that I've gone into despair energy outside of hope energy. Why? Because I am giving too much, or in particular, I'm giving too much to the wrong people. It happens all the time. I had to learn habits, actually. I had to train my introverted sensing so that when people start sliding in my DMs, asking me about help, and it's so interesting, especially, INTJ women, it's extremely common. Most recent one was actually an ENFJ woman sliding in my DMs and trying to butter me up, social engineer me basically into revealing what her type is so she wouldn't have to pay for our type verification service, essentially. This happens all the time. It's like an average of, 3 times a week this happens. Slide in my DMs on XYZ social media platform, who knows. Happens a lot on Instagram and now and also on Discord, because I have this reputation. I have a reputation of giving too much with my extroverted feeling child as a UDSF ENTP. It's actually funny because that's what Andrew Tate does. See, a lot of people don't even realize that about Andrew Tate, because his negligent function is extroverted feeling, because he too is a UDSF ENTP. So he's got a real soft spot for helping people. You know, the negligent function actually is a really big pathway that you could actually utilize to take advantage of people from an ego hacking perspective if you're not careful, right? If you're not careful. But what ends up happening is, because extroverted feeling child, for example, ends up giving so much, it inversely ends up creating something else in the process, right? So think of it as like some kind of yin and yang equilibrium, you know, from like an infinity perspective, yin and yang equilibrium. The production ends up happening, you know, giving from an extroverted feeling child perspective. But what this does is it ends up creating this this void, this hole, this need, basically, for what FE child is actually looking for. What is FE child looking for? What are extroverted feelers in general looking for? Well, that's gratitude, basically. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, okay? I mean, I know a few ENFJ women. Actually, saw one last night, and that woman is starved for gratitude. But, you know, she also married FI Demon, because pedagogue relationship. And that FI Demon from that man is like trying so hard. So, but the point is that the cognitive attitude of the child, it's overly childish, it's overly giving, it's giving too much, because I'm so hyper invested in my TI parent truth, right? And knowing the facts and knowing the truth, right? Being that, like, as a TI masculine primary man, who's also in a parent slot with the highest potential for highest accuracy, basically, from that perspective. It basically means I'm the ultimate problem solver. I'm the ultimate problem solver. And because I'm the ultimate problem solver, it's so easy for me to just fix everybody's problems. Like, you know, as my mother says, "Oh, Chase, you know, you're such a fixer." Actually, she got in my face about that like a week ago. You give too much, you know, you fix everybody, you fix everything, you're always fixing all the time. And it's like, oh God, yeah, no wonder 60% of my effort is actually done pro bono. Giving that out for free, you know, like consistently for free. Whereas if you were to compare me to like Steve Jobs, who's SDSF with introverted sensing, with introverted sensing masculine primary, his poop function, basically, his negligent function is extrovert intuition hero. Extrovert intuition hero is optimistic, so it's overly heroic. That's why he absolutely was entirely and utterly obsessed with giving people what they want. Like, he was notorious for, if he found anyone who didn't exactly want a particular feature on a piece of technology that he was developing or he had a vision for, he immediately cut it out. He immediately cut it out and found something else, or just got rid of it entirely. And that's one of the reasons why, actually, I believe it's the number one reason why he hated the idea of having a stylus, for example, on any of his technologies. Then in comes Tim Cook, who is an ENTJ, and then all of a sudden Tim Cook is like, oh yeah, let's have a stylus now, because ENTJs love them some stylus. You know what I'm saying? And that's normal, right? That's normal. So you can actually track, you know, a lot of human behavior just understanding the negligent function and its weaknesses. Those weaknesses can be exploited, but at the same time, those weaknesses can also become huge strengths. So you have to be really, really careful. There's pros and cons to every cognitive function naturally, but when it comes to like the negligent function, there are some nice pros, right? But there are also some huge cons. You know, in my case, you know, the con is that I could be taken advantage of, basically. People keep taking from me without giving back. And then that actually causes me to, throughout my life, I've actually been really, really weak to wayfarers, especially INTJs, right? Especially INTJ women, right? It's one of the reasons why, if you think about it, I'm actually really bitter in general towards INTJ women. That's why I'm bitter towards them. Because in my life, no one has taken more from me without giving back, right? You see, that's why. This is why Chase is bitter, right? That's why it's happening, okay? So, that also ends up, that bitterness, it grows and grows and grows, and then all of a sudden I'm at risk of becoming UDUF because of that growing bitterness, that growing outward bitterness that causes my cognitive focus to actually change from subconscious focus to unconscious focus. So then I become less kind, right? My kindness goes away because there's a lack of kindness coming to me because I've been showering everyone with every child kindness in the process. You see what I'm saying? Let's look at some other examples. Shout out to Bombs Too Fair. Shout out to Koj, K-O-J, K0J actually. These two men, SDUF, ENTP men, their masculine primary function is, guess what? It is introverted intuition, essentially. Like, that's what's going on there. So, introverted intuition, masculine primary. But what function is in cognitive axis with introverted intuition, masculine primary, as a nemesis function inside of an ENTP? Well, guess what? That is extroverted sensing demon, which means their extroverted sensing demon is overly demonic. It's extra demonic. Extra demonic. It's extra cringe, you know? And SDUF ENTPs have the biggest reputation of all of the ENTPs out there of being the most cringe, the absolute most cringe, right? Now, SDUF women, no, that's not how it is actually. That's not actually how it is. Their issue is that, you know, from a woman's side, their feminine primary function as SDUF is actually extroverted thinking, okay? Extroverted thinking. So this is like like Elizabeth, who was on the Discord server for a while, and so her negligent function would be introverted feeling trickster, right? And it became overly optimistic. It became overly a trickster to the point where she would be utilizing principles that just wouldn't quite work, right? Principles in terms of, it could be anything. It could be anything. She talked a lot about fitness, and the fitness principles that would work for her would not necessarily work for other people, as she shared those principles with other people. For example, and I'm not bagging on Elizabeth. I love Elizabeth. I like Elizabeth. It's not a big deal. I'm not bagging on her at all, so please don't take it that way. But what I'm trying to say is that introverted feeling trickster is extra tricksterish. Extra tricksterish. So she often gets tricked from her FI even more than the average ENTP bear, basically, from that point of view. Or there's a couple other examples. So let's see. Let's do a few other examples. So there's let's see here. Okay, yeah. So there's my wife, who is an ISFP, SDSF, right? So her feminine primary function as SDSF, ISFP, Chris Knife, is extroverted thinking, okay? So that's her feminine primary function. So she's like probably one of the best listeners I have ever met in my life. She's insanely good at it. She takes her reputation very seriously, very, very seriously. And because of that, you know, I can't help but think highly of her just by default. I just can't. And then the function that is on her axis, which would be her negligent function, is basically her introverted feeling hero. So she ends up becoming overly heroic with introverted feeling hero, which means she is consistently going out of her way to be the most good, the most moral, the most principled person ever, basically, as a woman. And that drives her consistently in everything she does. Or there's right. So she's UDSF as an INFJ, right? So top two functions. That would basically mean that her extroverted feeling feminine primary function, the function that's on axis with that is TI child. So her TI child becomes overly correct, overly like, look at this thing I found. I discovered this thing, so I'm going to show, because, you know, discovery is attached to the child function, you know, in terms of the INFJ basically, and so she's producing discovery constantly. It's like, I know this thing. I just found out this thing. I'm going to show you this thing. And so she's constantly like, check out this meme, or check out this TikTok, or check out this person said on Discord, or check out how ridiculous this is. Check out this thing that I found out, you know, from that perspective. You know, and it's an overly childish TI child, basically, right? Which could potentially put her at risk of making too many assumptions, you know, or maybe even potentially overly nitpicky of other people. And that is expressed through basically the octagram in terms of outward idealization, you know. But also, it makes her overly committed, well committed to problem solving and solving problems, which is good because we just added her to the team recently to take on some problem solving related tasks, and she's been doing a great job. You see what I'm saying? So that's a perspective of an INFJ female from that perspective. All right, chat. Give me some other people you want me to do here. Like, tell me some other types. You know, a female, male, XYZ type of an octagram, and I'll explain it to you like right here on the show. Like, no problem. I'll do that for you. Come on. All right, cool. UDUF, INTP male. We're going to talk about Samwise, and we're going to talk about Anton, the man. A man I have great respect for. I shook his hand. He's a good dude. Love that man. All right, so UDUF, INTP. So masculine primary function of introverted feeling, which means the nemesis function is the negligent function, which is extroverted thinking. So it's overly optimistic, right? It's overly optimistic. It's got that worry. It's like it's a little extra worried, and they take their reputation very seriously. They very much take their reputation very seriously. Like, for example, Samwise, you know, he's our fellow content creator for the Ego Hacker community. He's been handling the Ego Hackers YouTube channel a lot, and you know, he ends up developing his reputation over time. People really like him. He has that star-based seductive style because he's like becoming a star essentially, and increasing his popularity, increasing his reputation. And sure, naturally, he's not really aware of the things that would increase his reputation, but he is hyper aware of the things that reduce his reputation. And so he avoids doing those things. So he's really, really motivated by anything that could actually increase his reputation. And that's why he did this really funny show recently. And of course, he was telling me about his macaroni and cheese bit that he did on the Ego Hackers Discord server, which was absolutely hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. Yeah, I get that you don't really care that much, bro, about your reputation. But the thing is that is your reputation. It's where you're actually drawing your reputational resources from. That lack of caring in your introverted feeling demon towards that, and then you end up developing a reputation that you don't actually really want to let go of. You don't want to let go of that reputation because that reputation actually ends up becoming a part of how you are developing your own personal legacy, essentially, right? That's what's happening there, you know? So when you're UDUF, you really go into that star mode. You're really trying to figure out a way to develop your reputation further, whether or not you're conscious of it or not. And it's hard to be conscious of it because guess what? It's so deep into your shadow. It is technically your unconscious side of your mind. You're not exactly conscious that you're even doing this. You're not. Whereas like from my FE child, I'm very conscious of how it's going. I'm very conscious of what it's actually doing. You see? I'm very conscious of the fact that throughout my life, I have been taken advantage of, especially by INTJ women, for example. So even ENFPs, actually. ENFPs. So ENFPs love them that FE child. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I generally don't think I'm going to get noticed by anyone unless I'm on the stage. That's why I became a showman, yes. And you are a showman. And you are a showman because of that extroverted thinking nemesis as your negligent function, basically. Because you're choosing to be negligent of the things that would typically make someone have a high reputation, and then you're just leaning into it extra hard, which ends up becoming your reputation, essentially. So it kind of seems a little complicated, but that's how it works in essence. So give me some more examples, folks. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Let me scroll up. What do we got? All right. So SDUF INFJ. Let's do SDUF INFJ. Okay. So Mr. Bea asks for SDUF INFJ. So SDUF INFJ. The masculine primary function for that would be, let's see here. It would be introverted feeling critic, right? Introverted feeling critic. is the masculine primary function, and the function that is in axis with that is the trickster function, which is extroverted thinking trickster. It's overly optimistic, excuse me. And then it too is having something similar to that of what Samwise is doing with his extroverted thinking, and trying very hard, and it's all focused on achievement. He's trying to achieve. The thing is, though, is what Bea doesn't understand right now in his life is that he doesn't know what to achieve. But from his perspective, he's trying so hard to be that achiever. And he's working so hard to be to the point of overcompensating and being an overachieving INFJ, basically. That's what's happening. An overachieving INFJ, and he has this real need to achieve something. The problem is that Bea doesn't actually know what he is trying to achieve. He just knows that he has to achieve, basically, because of the negligence that is there within his extroverted thinking trickster as his negligent function as an SCUF INFJ. Okay, that's basically how that works, and that's where that's coming from. All right, let's see here. UDUF ENFP, male UDUF ENFP. Okay, so that would be introverted thinking, masculine primary, which is in, I'm glad you brought that one up, actually. I was dealing with one just last night where we were having a debate about logic versus rationale. Okay, so logic versus rationale. And his negligent function is extroverted feeling, okay? And it's a pessimistic function, very pessimistic, to the point where he ends up adopting traditional social norms because it's like, hey, if other people value this, he's not really going to criticize it that much with his critic function. He's not going to use his critic function to criticize other people's values as much. He ends up becoming way too accepting of social norms, way too accepting of what the collective ends up valuing as a UDUF ENFP, essentially, right? That's how that works, okay? So let's go to the next one. Let's see who we got here. A UDSF INFP. We could definitely do that one. So UDSF INFP, let's see, is that a male or a female? I need to know. Gotta have some gender in there, NT28. If we do a male, it's introverted feeling, which means extroverted thinking. Pessimistic, inferior is the for a male is ultimately a let's see here. So if it's a male, they're extra afraid, right? They're extra afraid of screwing up their reputation. Extra afraid, right? Oftentimes, this is the UDSF INFP male is the one who speaks the least, right? And is most afraid to share their opinion. And they end up standing there just taking in all the information and confirming their introverted feeling hero, and they become extra behind the scenes as a result because they're spending too much time listening on other people instead of actually sharing their valuable opinion whatsoever, because that fear is basically overblown. It's extra inferior, because it's the negligent function. It's extra pessimistic. So it's a higher level of fear in their inferior function as a UDSF INFP. Now, if it's an INFP woman, their feminine primary function is extroverted tuition, which means their introverted sensing child ends up becoming the negligent function. An introverted sensing child, they probably become hyper lazy. Hyper restful, hyper rested. They got to be extra rested. They care about their comfort zone way too much. A UDSF INFP woman is extremely overprotective of their comfort zone and really have no patience for people who are disrupting their comfort zone. But at the same time, this woman ends up becoming hyper patient. Too patient. Way too patient. And ends up taking way too much abuse in her life as a result of that. So yeah, those are some examples. Some examples as to what the personality types, according to their octagram and their gender, all combined, where you can identify their UCT, and then you can actually figure out exactly what their negligent function actually is and why it's behaving that way, right? And what this does is it actually exposes motivation, exposure to motivation. We're talking, obviously, someone's naturally motivated by their UCT function, their masculine or feminine primary functions. but there's an additional motivation there that comes from their negligent function, because their negligent function ends up becoming more of a need, a hidden need, whereas their masculine primary function or feminine primary function ends up becoming more of a want, essentially. So it's needs versus wants. You see what I'm saying, folks? Needs versus wants. And so the need, it's weird because like I need to solve problems. I need to help people. You see what I'm saying? From my extroverted feeling child approach, right? And it's one of the ways that like I emotionally have to like live with myself, because extroverted feeling child is still an emotional function because it is a judgment function. I don't know how many times in my life I've heard from SDUF INTJ women specifically always claiming that I'm too emotional, right? Because extroverted feeling child as a negligent function, it ends up, in my youth I would trauma dump with it a lot, because extroverted feeling trauma dumps. That's what it does. It trauma dumps, right? So I end up trauma dumping too much. They can't emotionally handle the trauma dumping, etc. So then they're like, oh, you're being too emotional. I can't be around you. That kind of a thing, right? And that's what would happen consistently all over and over and over. And every single SDUF INTJ woman I would ever be in a relationship with, it happened over and over and over and over. It's to the point where it could be entirely expected. So yeah. All right, I think I've hammered this horse pretty well. I think the horse is dead now, and we're beating the crap out of it, and there's blood everywhere. And so yeah, I guess we're gonna have to get the cleanup crew on this one. So never not make it educational, good sir. Never not, because we all know you are an intellectual. So anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening. That's it for Cutting Edge March 2024. I'll see you guys on the next episode next month. Hopefully we can explore more of these little functional dichotomies as how the attitudes are adjusted, specifically as a result of our universal compatibility theory functions with our masculine and feminine primary functions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.